Her billionaire husband divorced her the same week she found out she was pregnant. He walked away, cold, certain, and cruel, choosing the glitter of success over the heartbeat of his own family. Naomi Clark packed her life into a single box and left before the morning light touched their bed. She didn't cry. She just promised her unborn child she'd never beg anyone to stay. The nights were endless. She learned to breathe through contractions, alone, whispering names into the dark so her babies would know their mother had hope, even when she didn't. When the hospital lights flickered above her, there was no hand to hold, no voice to say, "You're not alone." Only 3 newborn cries, small, perfect, and fatherless. Meanwhile, Elias Monroe built an empire of glass towers and hollow victories, every deal louder than his silence at night. He told himself he'd chosen ambition over love, until the call came. "Your mother's fading fast. If you want to say goodbye, come now." 3 years later, he walked into Mercy General to face the truth, and saw her, through the glass, the woman he left behind, holding 3 little girls who looked just like him. In that hallway, all his billions couldn't buy back a single heartbeat he'd missed. If you were her, could you forgive him? Share your thoughts below, and watch what happens when he walks back into her life. For a long moment, Elias just stood there, frozen behind the glass, heart racing, mind blank. He wanted to walk away, but his feet didn't move. He turned toward the elevator, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of what he'd seen. The doors opened, and without thinking, he stepped inside, then pressed the wrong button. Elias expected the gray silence of the ICU. Instead, when the doors slid open, he was met with warmth, soft yellow light, the faint sound of the newborn cries drifting down the hallway. He froze again. The sign on the wall confirmed it. Maternity ward. His hand hovered over the elevator, but something inside him refused to move. He stood there, surrounded by the sound of life beginning, while his own felt like it was ending upstairs. A nurse passed by, smiling politely. Elias nodded, pretending to belong, pretending to breathe. He glanced through the long glass window that lined the corridor. Rows of tiny cribs, nurses rocking infants wrapped in pastel blankets. The air smelled like milk and hope, 2 things that had nothing to do with him anymore. And yet, he stayed. Something about this floor felt familiar. Something pulled at him like a thread he couldn't cut. That's when he saw her shadow move inside one of the rooms. He turned toward the glass again. A woman sat near the window, her hair tied back, a blanket draped across her lap. She lifted her head, and time broke in half. Naomi Clark. Elias felt the air vanish from his lungs. Her face, thinner now, tired, but still hers. And in her arms, a baby. Then another, and another. 3 tiny bundles pressed against her chest, their small hands curled, their eyes barely open. But even from across the glass, he saw it. That color, that unmistakable shade of gray-blue. His eyes. He took one slow step forward. The hallway blurred. Every noise faded until he could only hear the faint rhythm of his heart. He whispered her name, but it didn't reach her. She didn't look up. She just rocked the babies gently, humming a tune he remembered, the same lullaby she used to hum when she cooked on Sunday mornings. Elias pressed his hand against the cold glass. 3 lives, 3 pieces of himself, and not one of them knew his name. The world tilted. He backed away from the window, gripping the metal rail for balance. 3. Not 1, not 2, 3. His knees nearly gave out. His body shook as the truth settled in. These weren't coincidences. They were his. Elias leaned against the wall, staring at the floor tiles until they blurred. The hallway spun with whispers of laughter, monitors beeping somewhere far away. He thought of Naomi's last words before she left. "You'll regret this someday." He thought regret would come as guilt. It came as pain so real it burned. A nurse approached, asking if he was all right. He nodded, but his voice was gone. He managed to step closer to the glass again. Naomi looked peaceful, her face soft under the hospital light. He saw how carefully she held each baby, how her lips brushed their foreheads one by one. He wanted to run. He wanted to scream. Instead, he stood there, silent, trapped between what he built and what he lost. The elevator chimed behind him. His mother was waiting upstairs. The ICU smelled of antiseptic and fading time. Margot Monroe lay still, her eyes half open, her breathing shallow. Elias took her hand. It felt smaller than he remembered. "Mom," he whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. "You came." He nodded, forcing a smile. "I saw her, Mom. Naomi. She had my children." Margot's eyes filled with a light that was both sorrow and relief. "I know," she breathed. "I always knew." He froze. "You... what?" She squeezed his hand with the last of her strength. "She wrote me once, said she didn't want your money, just wanted peace." Elias bowed his head. His tears fell onto her blanket. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said. "I thought success would fix everything." Margot smiled faintly. "Money can build walls, son, but love is the only thing that holds a home together." Her hand loosened. The monitor beeped slower. Elias whispered, "Mom, please." But the room went still. He looked at the door, toward the floor below, and realized that while one heart stopped, 3 had just begun to beat. The sun slid low against the hospital windows, spilling gold across the white walls. Elias sat in the corner of the room where his mother's hand had gone still. The light touched the metal rails of her bed, then faded into shadow. He stared at the skyline outside, the city he owned. Towers of glass caught the last light, glittering like coins. He had built every one of them, yet none could shelter him now. Tears blurred the view. For the first time he felt what his mother meant. Money only reflects. It never warms. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. The smell of disinfectant clung to his sleeve. He whispered, "What did I trade her for?" Down the hall, a nurse closed a door. The click echoed like a gavel. Judgment delivered, sentence served. The light dimmed until only the heart monitor's green glow remained. Elias stayed there, between gold and gray, realizing that success had weight, and regret was heavier. Night settled over the hospital. Elias still sat beside his mother's bed, talking to her, though she could no longer hear. "I was ashamed, Mom," he said quietly. "I loved Naomi, but I was ashamed of the life we had. I thought the world would never respect me if I stayed poor." His voice cracked. "I left before she could see how scared I was. I told myself it was ambition. It was fear." He looked at his reflection in the dark window, the man he had become staring back like a stranger. "I betrayed her because I wanted people to see me as someone," he whispered. "But she was the only one who ever saw me." He touched his mother's blanket. "I thought I was building a future. I was just running from the past." The silence answered him. He felt the hollowness of the room, the same hollowness inside his chest. Somewhere below, a baby cried, and the sound tore through the quiet like truth itself. The cry carried him backward in time, to a small classroom with chipped paint and a single open window. Naomi stood at the front, violin under her chin, her eyes closed as the bow danced across the strings. That was how he first saw her, a sound so pure it made him forget his own name. She opened her eyes and smiled. "Music makes poor people feel rich," she told him then. He had laughed, not knowing how right she was. They walked home that day sharing one umbrella. She talked about her students, about hope, about starting a music program for children who couldn't afford lessons. He talked about inventions, about a company that would change the world. They were both dreamers, hers about people, his about power. Now, years later, the memory played in his head like a broken record. He could almost hear the faint sound of her bow echoing through the hospital halls. He whispered, "You made life sing, Naomi," and I silenced it. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like distant strings. Success had come faster than he imagined. Investors, awards, interviews, and the feeling of standing higher than everyone else. At first, he called Naomi every night, then every week. Then, not at all. She showed up at one of his events once, wearing the same red dress she used to love. He noticed how simple it looked under the chandelier lights. People stared. He felt their eyes and felt shame burn his skin. That night, he told her she didn't fit his world anymore. He remembered her standing there in the rain, not crying, just looking at him. She said one sentence, "I hope you find what you're really chasing." He never did. He found money, but never peace. Now the memory returned like punishment. The sound of rain against glass, her voice, the look in her eyes before she walked away. He had traded kindness for image, love for pride, and the cost of that trade had no refund. Morning crept in pale and quiet. Elias dozed in the chair beside his mother's bed. A flutter of wings brushed the window. 2 sparrows perched on the sill, tapping at the glass. Margot stirred. Her eyes opened faintly. "Mom?" he whispered. She smiled weakly. "They came back," she murmured. "Naomi used to feed them outside my window." Elias leaned closer. "You knew about her pregnancy, didn't you?" Margot's breath trembled. "Yes. She told me. Asked me not to tell you. Said if you ever found your way back, it had to be on your own." He froze. The truth cut deeper than any lie. "She wanted you to learn what love costs," Margot whispered. Tears slipped down his face. "I would have come sooner," he said. She touched his cheek, a fragile gesture. "Then you wouldn't be ready." The sparrows lifted off, vanishing into the morning light. Margot closed her eyes again, her hand falling to the sheets. Elias watched the sky through the window, 2 small wings fading into gold, and felt forgiveness hovering just beyond reach. Rain fell in quiet sheets the morning they buried Margot Monroe. Elias stood under the gray sky, the scent of wet earth clinging to his coat. People from the hospital came, some from his company, all whispering condolences that sounded the same. Then, through the mist, Naomi appeared. She walked slowly, dressed in black, her posture steady. In her hands she carried a violin wrapped in a pale scarf. Elias's breath caught. Naomi stepped to the casket, unwrapped the instrument, and placed it on the polished wood. "She loved this sound," Naomi whispered, said it made the world softer. The crowd fell silent. Only rain tapped against umbrellas like a faint rhythm of grief. Elias watched her fingers linger on the violin's neck, trembling once before she stepped back. Something inside him broke and settled at the same time, a symbol of love, a goodbye that needed no words. As they lowered the casket, a small bird landed on the violin for just a second, then flew away. After the funeral, the parking lot shimmered with puddles. Elias caught up to Naomi near her car. She turned, face calm but unreadable. "Naomi," he said, the words scraping out of his throat. She crossed her arms. "You have no rights, Elias." He didn't argue. He nodded once. "I know." The simplicity of it hurt more than shouting ever could. Wind moved through the trees, rattling the wet leaves. He searched for words but found none that mattered. "I just didn't know," he managed. Her eyes softened, just for a heartbeat, then turned distant again. "That's the problem. You never looked long enough to see." She opened the car door. Elias stepped back. "They're beautiful," he said quietly. Naomi paused. "They're mine," she answered, then drove away. The taillights blurred in the rain. He stood there long after she was gone, realizing that remorse has no sound, only silence heavy enough to drown in. A week later, Naomi called. Her voice was steady, cautious. "You can see them," she said. "Once a week. Saturdays. 1 hour. No gifts, no money." Elias exhaled slowly. "Thank you." "This isn't for you," she added. "It's for them." He accepted every rule. When Saturday came, he stood outside her apartment building with a paper bag of groceries and left it by the door, untouched. Naomi opened the door, the 3 girls behind her like small echoes of sunlight. Rowan held a toy rabbit. Sage hid behind her mother's leg. Isla blinked curiously. Elias knelt. "Hi," he said, his voice shaking. Naomi crossed her arms. 1 hour starts now. The clock on the wall ticked louder than his heartbeat. He sat on the floor with the girls, unsure what to do, terrified of doing it wrong. For 60 minutes, he listened, smiled, and tried to remember how to breathe in a room full of life he didn't deserve. When it ended, Naomi opened the door. Same time next week. Her tone was flat, but it was a beginning. The next Saturday, he tried harder. He arrived early, hands clean, heart trembling. Naomi handed him a bottle and pointed toward Rowan. She needs to eat. He nodded, confident. Then spilled milk down her blanket. The baby screamed. Sage started crying too. Elias panicked, grabbing tissues, apologizing under his breath. Naomi took the bottle calmly, soothed the baby, and said only, "It's okay. You'll learn." He sat there, small beneath the weight of his mistakes. 3 years ago, he was a man who commanded boardrooms. Now he couldn't calm a 3-month-old. When the hour ended, he stood to leave, embarrassed. Naomi walked him to the door. "See you next Saturday," she said, voice soft but firm. He looked at her, confused. "After that mess?" She shrugged. They didn't cry the whole time. Progress. As the door closed behind him, Elias felt something shift. Humility replacing pride, love learning how to breathe again. During the week, he practiced. A doll sat in his office chair while he learned to hold, feed, and burp without spilling. His assistants pretended not to notice. Saturday came again. He entered Naomi's apartment with slower hands and quieter steps. Rowan looked up at him, wide-eyed. He smiled. "Hi, sweetheart." This time, the bottle didn't spill. Sage giggled. Isla tugged on his sleeve. Naomi watched from the kitchen, arms crossed but her face softer than before. He hummed a lullaby his mother used to sing. For the first time, all 3 girls were quiet, their eyes fixed on him. The clock ticked past the hour. Naomi didn't stop him. She just leaned on the doorway, listening. When he finally stood, she said, "You're getting better." He smiled, shy, almost boyish. "I have good teachers." It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was warmth. The kind that fills a home before love dares to return. 12 weeks passed like a blur of bottles, blankets, and sleepless mornings. Elias showed up every Saturday, then every Wednesday when Naomi allowed it. She was thinner now, her clothes hung loose, her eyes hollow from exhaustion. He noticed she barely ate. Half a slice of toast, sometimes coffee, nothing else. One morning, as he held Isla, he asked gently, "When did you last have a real meal?" Naomi avoided his gaze. "I'm fine." But her hands trembled as she reached for the bottle. He saw it then. The quiet suffering she never spoke about. Not anger, not pride, just survival. Elias felt something shift inside him. For months he had been consumed by guilt, trying to fix the past. Now he simply saw her. The woman keeping 3 lives alive with nothing left for herself. He opened the fridge. Almost empty. She noticed. "Don't," she warned. "Don't you dare feel sorry for me." "I don't," he said softly. "I feel sorry for me, for not seeing sooner." For the first time, she didn't have an answer. It happened on a Wednesday. Elias arrived to find the door unlocked, the babies crying. He rushed in. Naomi lay on the floor near the crib, pale, motionless. "Naomi!" he shouted, kneeling beside her. Her pulse was weak, but there. He called 911, his hands shaking as he tried to calm the girls. When the paramedics arrived, he followed the ambulance to Mercy General, the same hospital where everything had started. Hours later, her best friend Tessa stormed into the waiting room. "This is your fault," she said, eyes blazing. "She's been skipping meals for months to afford formula. You didn't even notice?" Elias swallowed hard. "She wouldn't let me help." "Then you make her let you," Tessa snapped. "You say you've changed? Then prove it." He sat there, head in his hands, listening to the faint echo of monitors through the hallway. The same sounds from the day he lost his mother. Only this time he wasn't losing someone to death. He was losing her to exhaustion, and it hurt just as much. Naomi was discharged 3 days later. She looked fragile but determined as ever. The hospital's report was blunt. malnutrition, severe exhaustion. Social services had given her a warning. If she couldn't demonstrate adequate care, they'd review custody. That fear pushed her to speak the words she hated most. "I need help," she said quietly. Lias nodded. "Whatever you need." "You come 3 days a week," she said, voice steady. "Monday, Wednesday, Friday. 2 hours each morning. You feed, you change, you help, then you leave. No money," she added. "No gifts, no charity. Just work." He agreed instantly. She crossed her arms. "If you're late once or make this about you, it's over." "I won't," he promised. "I'm not here to fix you, Naomi. I'm here to carry what I should have years ago." For the first time, she looked at him without anger, only fear of believing again. "Then we'll see," she said. "Start Monday." Elias arrived at 6 sharp. Naomi looked half asleep, her hair in a messy knot. 3 babies cried in unison, a symphony of chaos. She handed him a bottle. "Rowan first, Sage second. Isla just wants to be held." He nodded, rolling up his sleeves. He fed Rowan slowly, humming softly. The baby quieted, eyes closing. Next, Sage. This time he remembered to burp her halfway through. She smiled, her first real smile at him. Naomi paused mid-step, watching. "You got her to sleep?" she whispered. He shrugged, gentle. "Guess she just needed someone slower." For 2 hours they worked together. Not as enemies, not yet as partners, but as 2 people keeping the same small world alive. When his time ended, Naomi stood by the door, arms crossed but her voice soft. "You did well today," she said. Elias smiled. "So did you." For the first time, she didn't correct him. By the 3rd week, exhaustion claimed Naomi completely. One morning, Elias arrived to find her asleep in the chair, the babies already stirring. He didn't wake her. Instead, he took over. Bottles, diapers, lullabies. He moved quietly, learning each child's rhythm, their sounds, their needs. Rowan's hungry cry, Sage's soft whimper, Isla's giggle when held just right. Hours passed before Naomi woke with a start. She looked around. All 3 girls were fed, changed, and asleep. Elias sat on the floor, washing bottles in the sink. "You let me sleep," she said, her voice fragile. "You needed it," he replied. She stared at him for a long time, eyes glistening. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "Thank you." It was the first time she'd said those words to him in years, and for Elias, it felt like forgiveness brushing past. Not fully landing, but near enough to make him breathe again. He smiled softly. "Any time." Naomi turned away, hiding the tears she didn't want him to see. Weeks turned into months. The house no longer echoed with panic, but with quiet rhythm. Feeding, laughing, resting. When the social worker arrived, Naomi's hands shook as she poured coffee. Elias sat nearby, holding Isla while the twins played on the rug. The woman took notes, eyes softening at the sight. "You've built a stable routine," she said. "It's clear your children are loved and cared for." Naomi nodded, her lips pressed tight. The worker smiled. "You'll keep custody, Ms. Clark. You're doing well." Naomi exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. Elias met her eyes from across the room. No words, just quiet pride. When the door closed, Naomi leaned on the table, trembling. Elias handed her a glass of water. "You did it," he said. She looked at him. The man she once thought unreliable, now standing steady, calm. "We did it," she whispered. Outside, rain tapped against the window. For the first time, it didn't sound lonely. The first birthday arrived in spring. Naomi decorated the small living room with paper balloons and soft music. Elias came early, carrying cupcakes and candles. The triplets giggled in the matching dresses. Rowan, always the brave one, held onto the couch, wobbling on tiny feet. Naomi clapped. "Come on, baby. Come to Mama." But Rowan turned, eyes bright, and took her first step, toward Elias. He froze, heart pounding, afraid to breathe. Naomi's smile faltered for a moment, then returned, fragile but real. He knelt, arms open. "That's it, sweetheart. You're walking." Rowan fell into his lap, laughing. Naomi blinked fast, hiding tears. The room felt both full and hollow. Elias looked up at her, unsure whether to apologize or celebrate. She shook her head gently. "She just walked toward love," she said. It was the kindest sentence he'd ever heard, and the most painful. After that day, things began to shift. Naomi started letting him stay past his 2-hour limit. Sometimes they shared coffee while the girls napped. She no longer corrected him when he said, "our daughters." Instead, she just listened, tired but at peace. He fixed the leaking faucet, replaced the broken light in the kitchen. Small things, but they built quiet trust between them. One evening, Naomi found him asleep on the couch, a baby curled on his chest. She stood there for a long time, arms crossed, unsure what hurt more, the years they lost or the comfort they'd finally found. The next morning, she told him softly, "You don't have to rush home after they sleep." He smiled, unsure if she meant for that day or forever. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the beginning of belief. The next Monday, he didn't show. Naomi fed the girls alone, her chest tightening with each passing minute. By noon, anger replaced fear. She told herself she was foolish for trusting him again. Then, at 4, the doorbell rang. Elias stood there, his shirt stained, eyes red. "I'm sorry," he said. "A student fainted at the community center. I stayed until the ambulance came." Naomi folded her arms. "You could have called." "I know," he said. "I didn't want to sound like another excuse." She looked at him for a long moment. His hand still smelled of antiseptic. He hadn't lied. "You scared me," she admitted. He nodded. "I'll never disappear again." The twins peeked from behind her legs, smiling at him. Naomi sighed. "Come in, they've been waiting." As he stepped inside, the tension melted. Not gone, but quieter. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come through words. It shows up at the door, late but real. That evening, Naomi sat at the table with a stack of papers. Elias washed bottles at the sink, humming softly. "Elias," she said. He turned, drying his hands. "I'm adding your name to their birth certificates." He blinked, unsure he'd heard right. "Not because of us," she continued. "Because they deserve to know who their father is." He nodded slowly. "Thank you." His voice cracked on the second word. She pushed the forms toward him. "Sign them." He took the pen with trembling fingers. His name, Elias Monroe, filled the blank spaces he once left empty. When he finished, he stared at the ink until it blurred. Naomi looked at him quietly, seeing both pride and shame in his eyes. "This doesn't mean I've forgiven you," she said. "I know," he whispered, "but it means I'm finally theirs." For the first time in years, Elias cried, not from regret, but from belonging. Evening light filled the small apartment, soft and gold. Naomi stood by the window, her violin case open for the first time in years. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts of old songs. Elias sat quietly on the couch, the girls asleep in the next room. He didn't speak. He just watched her lift the instrument, press it under her chin, and breathe. The first note trembled, then grew steady. It was the same melody she used to play when they had nothing but hope and a single candle on the table. Her fingers moved with memory more than strength. The sound filled the room, wrapping around them like forgiveness. Elias closed his eyes. He could almost see the girl he fell in love with, the one who smiled through every storm. When the last note faded, Naomi lowered the bow. Tears touched her cheeks, but she smiled. "Still remember?" she asked softly. He nodded. "I never forgot." For a long moment, they just sat in silence, the air still trembling with music, the kind that mends what words cannot. Later that night, after the girls were asleep, Naomi poured 2 cups of tea. They sat across from each other, the quiet stretching between them like a question. She looked down at her hands. "I don't know what we are anymore." Elias leaned forward, his voice low. "We don't need to name it. We just keep showing up." Naomi met his eyes, searching for the man she once knew. He wasn't polished now, not guarded, just steady, human. She smiled faintly. "You always have an answer." He shook his head. "No, I just finally learned how to stay." A clock ticked in the kitchen. The sound filled the space between their breaths. Outside, rain began again, soft against the windows. Naomi looked toward the bedroom door, where 3 small shadows moved in their sleep. "For them," she said quietly. Elias nodded. "And maybe for us, too." Something gentle passed between them. Not passion, not closure, just peace. Months later, as winter thinned into spring, Naomi called him late one evening. "Don't leave after they sleep tomorrow," she said. "Stay. I want them to see their father when they wake up." He almost didn't believe her. But the next morning, sunlight broke across the curtains, and the girls ran into the living room shouting his name. "Daddy!" Elias knelt, arms wide. They collided into him, laughter spilling everywhere. Naomi leaned in the doorway, arms folded, but smiling. He looked up. "You sure about this?" She nodded. They deserve mornings that feel like this. He made pancakes badly. The girls ate them anyway, syrup dripping down their chins. Naomi sipped coffee, watching the scene unfold. Chaotic, loud, alive. When he caught her gaze, she didn't look away. For the first time, there was no fear left between them. It wasn't perfect. It was better. It was real. That night, the house quieted. The girls slept, the moonlight spilling across the floor. Naomi and Elias sat on the couch, shoulders touching. She spoke first, voice soft. "I'm falling in love with you again." He didn't move. She continued. "But not with the man you were. With the man you've become." He turned toward her, eyes wet. "Then every mistake led me home." She smiled, half tear, half laughter. "You always had a home. You just forgot how to walk back." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Then I'll keep walking, every day, if it means staying here." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Forgiveness filled the space like air, invisible, essential. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, 2 hearts finally rested after years of running. Years later, the lake shimmered under the summer sun. Elias and Naomi sat on the porch, coffee mugs in hand, watching their daughters chase each other across the grass. Rowan tripped and he started to stand, but Naomi laughed. "She's fine. She always gets up." He smiled, his gaze lingering on the water. "You ever think about how we got here?" "Every day," she said. He nodded, voice low. "Sometimes life takes everything from you, just to teach you what really matters." Naomi rested her head on his shoulder. "And what's that?" He looked at their girls. "This? All of this." The wind carried their laughter across the lake, soft and endless. Elias closed his eyes, whispering a promise he'd already kept, to never leave again. If you believe in second chances, in love that learns, in families that heal, stay with us. There are more stories to tell.